Hi friends, Dominic here. So this is a special segment. It's excerpted from a conversation that I had with Brett Salkeld from Making Every Class Catholic. He's written a book called Making Every Class Catholic, and he hired me to build his website, makingeveryclasscatholic.com. And he is a public speaker. He goes around presenting to dioceses and Catholic schools, and the whole idea is how to help them not put like a sort of a nice Catholic covering on top of existing topics, but how to actually understand what the Catholic thing is, so that as we enter into all of our discussions, we're doing it from a Catholic understanding of the dignity of the human person, the point of life, and all of these sorts of things. So you can check it out, makingeveryclasscatholic.com. The link in the description for our full conversation, because our conversation went on for like way too long and it was too full of good stuff. So I pulled out this chunk and I asked to share it with my friends on our channel, and then you can see the rest of the full episode over on his channel, and it's linked in the description. Enjoy.
One of the things that I hear from many people as they get older, which this might sound like it's going in the opposite direction, but I think it's actually complementary to what you're saying, is rereading stories that they read when they were young, which includes, by the way, reading the same scriptures every 3 years and having those lenses now with new life circumstance, have them taking on more and different meaning that complements the earlier encounter with the same story. But your position relative to the story has shifted through whatever experiences you've gone through, and maybe other stories that you've heard in between, right? So anyway, I didn't have a prepared comment on that, but just
no, but it's absolutely
that's a dynamic
true.
many people recognize.
Well, that's why fairy tales continue to endure. It's a little bit maybe unfortunate that they're called that, and that only a select handful have been retold by, media juggernauts. But there are stories that have endured across multiple human cultures for tens of thousands of years, because there's something about that experience that can be reinterpreted or reread across multiple stages of your life, which says it's like a fractal, which means there's the child's way of understanding it, but then there's the adult, more deeply embodied way of understanding, and then there's the spirit and soul way of understanding it. And it's exactly the same narrative, but it just keeps getting deeper, and it keeps, for example, I love the story of Beauty and the Beast. And at first a rereading, it might be like, I don't know, men are difficult, girl, watch yourself, libraries are cool, standard stuff. Then you get to like the next level, and it's like, oh, this is interesting. It's about, how the woman can tame the man. And like Peterson at one point said, it's the delightful, dangerous challenge that every woman gets up to in life, which is, can I find a way to partner with this potential beast thing that I can't control, but if I could master it in some good relationship, I will be constituted to handle life really well. Then there's the next level after that, which is the more spiritual, psychological level, which is inside perhaps the soul of a woman. There's the beast, and there's also the beauty. This is not even about men. This is about the feminine, the divine feminine, and divine masculine. Are you able to woo and integrate them to be a functioning individual person that is spiritually sane, that is balanced, that is integrated? Most fairy tales, I think, will match a pattern like that. And of course, that third stage where you come back as like an adult, with kids, and you're older, and then you go, look at these fresh intuitions that arise out of these stories. It's amazing that a story can do that. This is one indication why I believe Tolkien's totally right in his article on fairy stories, where he says, first of all, we humans, storytellers maybe particularly, are porous to the elvish realm, and you can sub-elvish for angel. We are porous to it. It's communicating with us constantly. As I mentioned earlier, Martin Shaw, he's got this wonderful message or metaphor that I love, where he's like, stories can arrive in you or sort of appear in you like elves coming out of a shipwreck and crawling up on the beach, and you're there on that beach to maybe help them and salvage them. Some stories might be for you to sort of ingest, or for you to cultivate and nurture and take care of, and then present out to the world. Some stories, you sort of take them into your hut and you nurture them a little bit, and then they go on, they do their own thing, and it was never for you. But you were like a landing zone, that a seed bed that was meant to receive and germinate that story for a minute so that it could then go on to do other things, in the human family. This is one reason why the materialist viewpoint from our past century kind of becomes, when you take that viewpoint that you're literally matter or merely matter, and you read that up into your spiritual life, you make the wrong conclusions. And like you've mentioned multiple times, the point about fear. You take that sense of, well, I need to have super clear hygiene because that's what it takes to survive as a human body. We need clean environments. We need clean food. Otherwise, you get sick and you die. Well, your spiritual life is a ton more resilient than that. In fact, your spiritual life is uniquely designed to be able to navigate the complexities of good and evil that run through every single human heart. If you take that attitude of an immune response and being anemic with your diet to your spiritual life, like only healthy, squeaky clean, good stuff, that's valuable for building a strong constitution when you're young. I do believe you need to grow out of that to go on to become an adult, especially if you're trying to be an adult in dialogue and conversation with the rest of the world. I am not convinced that self-isolation in a hermitage is a good idea for everybody, maybe for very specific people. For a lot of people, you're just an introvert. And for some of us, we have to literally ask ourselves, what good are you to the human family if you're not doing anything with the one talent that you have of merely being yourself? Be the best version of yourself and then go and do something good for somebody else. And in that way, you start to discover how to love God and how to love yourself through the practice of meeting God in everybody else.
Tell me a little bit about, we're going to start landing the plane here. So storytelling as healing for the individual and for the culture. We're talking to teachers who are going to teach writing, creative writing in particular. They're going to have kids who love different genres and different ideas and want to explore with them. And we want to be in a Catholic school. Every teacher wants to encourage creativity and competence and all those kinds of things. In a Catholic school, we're going to have a particular angle that wants to, that this is part of becoming a saint.
Yeah.
And that this is part of our contribution to the common good, or as we might frame it, to the healing of the culture. What are some things that you would suggest at a very practical level, working with new writers, to think about what they're doing as part of a Christian vocation when they write? And let's acknowledge, like, some of these kids, God willing, are going to go on to be writers. And some of them are just going to learn a little bit about themselves and their place in the world through this practice that they do in high school. And they're not going to write again after they're done high school writing. But whether they go on to write in life or not, we're still forming a person in the thing that we're doing in grade 10 creative writing English.
Yeah. No, gosh, great questions. I am not a teacher. I have no degrees in teaching. I am a nerd and a dork who is absolutely in love with being Catholic and also with storytelling. So I'll read voraciously, but I have no experience being in front of a class. So friends, take this for what you will. Advice for creative writing. So yes, I do believe storytelling is a vocation. And by that, as I understand the definition of vocation, it is a way to use your interests and your energy and your ability to live in a way that serves God, that serves the ultimate good. And when you follow your vocation, you are working with the gifts and the charisms that you have. And you'll often know when you're doing something that is inherently good for you and maybe why you're here, when it brings you life, when you can get into the flow state, maybe effortlessly or more easily than more other people. These are your cheat codes to life. And they can sometimes be an indicator. These are things to pay attention to, that this is maybe why you're here. Go and do them well, have fun with them. Don't monetize them. But if we're talking about young people who are getting into this, a couple of little things that make sense to me. First is, creativity is not merely sitting down, running a mental Pinterest board, just fudging ideas together for the fun of it, and then just writing in something so that you can turn it in. Creativity is a form of spiritual play. There's a form of levity and of joy. You're sub-creating, as Tolkien described it. We have this incredible capacity because we are made in the image and likeness of God. Within ourselves, we can take information and data and stories and ingest them into ourselves and then reconstitute them into a new reality or idea and then share them with other people. Now, in the same way that, for God so loved the world that he sent his only son, for a lot of authors, they so love their inner world that they send themselves into their creative projects and they spend 1,000 hours and turn it into something that can then exist outside of them and be shared with other people. So these things emerge out of a state of love. And love will inevitably involve a sense of sacrifice, maybe some discipline and mastery. There's also a sense of play. So there will be a time period where if you're taking this really seriously, where you will need to do things like learn habits and learn discipline. If you want to get really good, it's like when parents make their kids play instruments, right? And play them for multiple hours a day, not just because they want you to get good at the instrument. It's because they want to teach you, for example, the skill of mastering something. You're not just mastering the instrument, you're mastering yourself. And this is why writers have to cultivate good habits. If this is something that you say is meaningful to you, do the time. Find a system so that you can continue to show up for yourself. Because for some reason, this matters to you. You owe it to yourself to find out why. I think a second sort of thought around a novel, and I found this after writing a novel like a year ago and got to like 100,000 words and I did not expect to. And I realized what I'm doing is a form of active contemplation. Writing, whether it's fiction or writing blogs or something, it's active contemplation. I'm sitting down, I've got an idea I don't fully understand, so I'm now going to spend 100,000 words trying to figure out what I'm trying to say. And maybe it's not very good, maybe it's just a draft I'll never share with anybody, maybe I'm going to create something wonderful, but I don't have to necessarily publish it. Maybe you'll do that later on. Let's take the pressure off the table of you need to finish something to publish it to share with somebody else. Not everybody needs to create for that reason. So as a form of active contemplation, it's a bit like journaling. So I would encourage, if you're in creative writing, journaling is probably a really good idea because you journal not just to write down what you did, but to find out and to start paying attention to yourself and to your own inner life. Nobody else can do that for you. You have to do that. Same thing with dream journaling. Start writing them down. Keep a little a dream diary. Don't try to understand everything. Just record it. Maybe look for patterns. Sometimes that is how your guardian angel, your subconscious, or whatever is trying to get you to see and pay attention to something that your hyper-focused daylight concentration is unable to see. But the super expanded experience of dreaming has other things that are important to you. And storytelling lives like two legs in two worlds. That expanded sort of dream world state where we can have direct contact with, as Tolkien would say, the elves and the angels, the part where you've got your body that is in direct contact with the world and with the cosmos, right? And it's fixed and it's limited. But then there's your soul, which is not fixed and limited to the edges of your skin. It can be, not just can be, it is in direct and constant communication and contact with the entire spiritual realm, which surrounds us on all sides. I love Peter Kreeft's definition. It has continents of meaning, continents of places and of activity. It's very, very busy in soul realms, in the spiritual world. And we are constantly receiving that. But if you never pay attention to yourself, you're missing out on why you have a specific gift to tell stories. So encouraging them to start to enjoy the process. When you do things in a spirit of play, you learn so much faster than when you are forced to do things. Learning you can learn little skills like how to structure characters and how to do world building and stuff like that. And those are all the mechanics of it. It's the mysticism of it that I would love for teachers to recapture, the sense that it is possible. There's a gift to be enjoyed and explored here. By doing it, you will learn and discover more about yourself. And perhaps the byproduct of this adventure is that you can create stories. But the novels that you create and the stories you create, they're not technically the point. You are the point. It's like a potter who wants to learn how to make beautiful pots. He will make 1,000 pieces of pottery. They were never the point. Him learning to be a master of the skill of pottery for who knows what reason, why. The point is, he is the point. If you're a storyteller, you are the point, and all of these are your practice sessions, and maybe you embody wonderful things in them. But frankly, we as authors write stories and longer novels because we want to feel through and understand something. There are some ideas that are so simple, you can put them in a catechism or a Cliff's Notes or a checklist and ship it. And there are some ideas that are so big and wild and beautiful and complex that you have to spend 100,000 pages or 100,000 words or 6,000 words to try to capture the feeling of this idea because it can't be distilled into just simple words. You could summarize, for example, what is Lord of the Rings? And if you were to simply summarize, well, it's about whatever, somebody might go, okay, I'm not going to change my life. But then you go and you watch the 9-hour, full version, and you get to the end and you're like, we need more popcorn. Let's do that again.
Right, right. Let me try distill something down that is helpful at risk of oversimplification, but
Yeah,
as
please do.
like a helpful bite-sized takeaway if I'm speaking to teachers. So this theme that you have that you finish with that it's not about producing a product, it's about becoming a kind of person. That's really essential actually for lots of thinking we do in Catholic education. It's really essential actually for thinking about our relationship with AI, that basic
Mhm.
principle. But as it applies to creative writing, one of the things that occurred to me as you were talking is whether, some tiny percentage of us are going to go on to write quite a bit in our lives and maybe even professionally, right? But if we're going to say that this is a worthwhile task for every person who graduates from my high school, right? Then what is the thing that is being achieved in the person through this particular task? And at least one way of articulating it might be to find out what you love and why. I wonder if that is a phrase for a creative writing teacher in a Catholic school to think about what is the task I'm doing when I'm inviting students to write that can help them make sense of why they're doing this task, because they're not going to grow up to be a novelist, 99% of them, or whatever it is.
Mhm.
And the skills are valuable and transferable, and that's all great. I'm not opposed, but at the level of through this activity, you become more of who God is calling you to be. That's what
Yeah.
we're doing here. And what does story contribute to that project? Maybe one way to say it is if we're paying attention to what we're doing when we write fiction, poetry, whatever it is, we're learning what we love and why. And then therefore learning something about ourselves and our relationship with God and others. Would that be I mean, it's boiled right down, but is that
No, I think it's absolutely true. Uh, Again, with the triad of the golden rule, there's love God and there's love your neighbor as yourself. We're shipped into reality with that triad burned into our bones. It's like in our soul. So if you're not in some way engaged in that little trinity of activity, well, you fragment, you fall apart, and you're not exactly sure what you're doing because you're not oriented appropriately. You're not in the right communion or right relation. Now, I think the way that it's presented is love God and love your neighbor as yourself. The phrase your neighbor, we can go a lot of places with this, but I'd like to give an interpretation of that, which is your neighbor is everybody. It can be the person who lives right next to you. I'd like to go with the sense everybody you are in affinity with, everybody that you feel perhaps neighborly to, like you're in a sense of brotherhood with. So if you've got a classroom of like, I don't know, 30 kids, right? One of the first rules that you learn as an author is that when you create, you are not creating for everybody because that's just not possible. You are creating for perhaps a particular audience. It is possible, it is literally just you. And it's very important to start there because if you don't even know yourself or why you love this thing, you need to just be quiet and sit down and after hours every day and mess around with this creative impulse and have fun and so on and figure out why are you being pulled into this. Maybe there's something here. But then as you start taking it more seriously, you gain the mastery of the craft. Now there's something else that starts to happen. You then decide whether you are here to provide something that is helpful or you are here to provide something to sell. And there are a lot of authors who make very good income just writing to market, creating whatever the market wants. There are a lot of authors out there who can do that. There's a lot of reasons to do that. With myself and my community, there's the added sort of sense or pressure of no, this is also a vocational path. It is not merely a financial path. As a vocational path, therefore, we're doing this to also play with the creative collaboration with God. God did not want to airdrop Lord of the Rings into human history without the collaboration of Tolkien. Tolkien was essential for the creation, the co-creation of this wonderful, fantastical thing that has just gone on to boil a century of human imagination. So as you're, encouraging kids to start to create, they're going to be pulled into different kinds of stories, different kinds of themes. It is possible that, and probable, specific kinds of people are going to want those kinds of stories. So don't try to write for everyone. Honor the fact that you're entering into a relationship with your reader. That can free you up to also be really honest with the story that you want to tell. If you're trying to tell a story that can be, let's say, very dark and difficult because you're trying to metabolize or through perhaps some sort of trauma or some difficulty that's going on in your life. But if you're thinking, well, I've got to justify this to my local parish priest and the local ladies down at the parish center and my teacher, if they are your mental pantheon of judges, you're not going to be honest with where you're actually supposed to be going. I would recommend, don't write for them. You didn't intend to create it for them anyway. Your family may not like the fact that you're doing this. Well, find a good mentor, make sure you're not doing the wrong thing, of course, but you didn't intend to create it for your family. There's a great example I love. Interviews on the LegendFiction channel. Her name is Karen Yulo. She wrote a book and it's kind of tongue-in-cheek called Jennifer the Damned. And it's about a girl who's a vampire who is raised by nuns, very Catholic nuns. And then a point comes where she reaches adolescence. And all of a sudden everything switches on, and so does this desire to go out and be a vampire. And this whole story is about this tension and struggle of like, well, I'm sort of supposed to be kind of a good Catholic girl, but now I've got all of this going on in me. What do I do? And it's a very dark, grim, and gallows humor sort of story. Turns out, a Catholic priest phoned her up and said, this book is amazing because the teens in my study groups who are struggling with very dark things loved this book because it so accurately presented, what they're going through. And it felt through what they're going through and helped them reach a place where they could start looking at things a bit differently. She was a bit stunned. She thought these would be the last people I would expect to enjoy and read this book. Turns out it was perfect for them. So in the same sense that not all content and not all stories are for everybody. For example, you don't read Song of Songs to a room of prepubescent boys. You don't read Hamlet to a room full of manic depressives. They're the wrong audiences for the actual genius that's in these stories. So it is the same thing. This also creates a space of freedom for the creator. You are not creating for the entire human family. You're creating for you, and you're creating for your neighbors, the people who are in affinity or alignment with what it is that you're trying to do. Now, it may take you a minute to find them, and that gets into conversation about marketing and branding and promotion, whatever, but that's a different conversation. You are creating for your audience because you're trying to heal them. And I think here's my last thought. In the same sense of healing, we talked about love in sub-creation, and that we create because we love this thing, especially if you're doing it out of a view of vocation. I think being a good storyteller, being a good author, will also call you to be a better human being. And again, this goes back to what I think is it's an essential foundational thing. You can't be a good saint unless you're an amazing human being. You can't be an amazing human being unless you're like a try hard, die hard, trying to be a good guy. So that process of gradation. Well, when characters go to create stories, ask any author who's got a novel in their mind or in their heart. We love our characters from the inside out. We don't love them from the outside in. When you meet people on the street, you start to know them from the outside and very gradually get to know who they are, maybe slowly get to know their soul. Maybe that takes years. When it comes to your family or the moment when you might decide that you want to marry your wife, or marry someone, you do that because you've had an intuitive sort of flash of the core of the person and you've decided, I love that person. I don't care what happens in life. I'm prepared to sacrifice everything for that person. And it's the same thing that we do with our characters. Our characters kind of arrive almost fully formed. We intuit the core of that person, and we will never abandon them. No matter what happens in that story, we will see them through to the end because we love them and we understand them. And we know that all they need is one extra chapter to get through being a pig-headed idiot to finally reach a point of conversion, no matter how dark things get. Why this matters is because this is how God looks at every single one of us, and he loves us from the inside out. So I think it's a little bit like therapy or psychology, right? When you sit down to write a novel and you're writing all these characters who do all kinds of good and bad things as they're trying to orient and figure out and wrestle against the goal that they're supposed to reach, You're doing it because you love them from the inside out. You have hope and faith that they can make the right decisions. And well, you kind of know that because you know the whole story from the inside out. The whole story does not exist without the character who lives it. Same thing with your life. God already knows this. Your whole life does not exist without you living it and the things that you do with that life. He'll never give up on you. Well, I think, well, what happens? I think this is why storytellers can be uniquely constituted to be helpful to the human family, among many other vocations. If I sit every single day and practice loving something from the inside out and trying to intuit the core of a person and never give up on them, that has got to, you do that intentionally. And then you turn around and go and engage with the rest of the human family. Well, that's darn good practice, I think, for being a good human being, for cultivating the mystic vision, and for practicing how to be a saint. Because every time that we meet saints, and people say when they've met a saint, what do they always say? I felt so seen. There was like an energy charge being in that person's presence. They saw me, they understood me. There was no judgment. There was only a gaze of loving kindness and of understanding. And maybe if there was correction, I would still want to hang out with them afterwards. Unless, of course, I'm a problem, then I've got to work with through stuff. So that, I think, is a distinctly beautiful vocation to encourage in storytellers.